So before I start waxing lyrical about how good Fallout New Vegas actually was, and still is, it'd be plain rude to not highlight the fact that the Fallout New Vegas version I'm playing on is the PC version of the game, and this version is notoriously known as being damn near unplayable without the use of fan-made mods. God bless those mod developing heroes. But even so, getting cocky and installing a few extra mods to spruce up the game a little can be just as infuriating as playing the vanilla version of New Vegas, and being brave enough to precariously install one single mod can mean the death of your save file and welcome back to your desktop, good sir. That being said, I still managed to get Fallout New Vegas running impeccably, and for those interested outside of the necessary script extenders and general fixes that are needed to get the game running up to a pleasant standard, I've installed mostly visual mods, a few texture overhaul mods and a weather overhaul mod, as well as adding the ability to sprint too, but other than that I've kept it as close to vanilla as possible. It's pretty disappointing that Obsidian have left this absolute classic by the wayside for the fans to pick up the mess and fix, and thank God they have. I do think we need to cut Obsidian a little bit of slack though, considering Bethesda were busy working on Skyrim at the time and reached out to Obsidian and only gave them 18 months to develop Fallout New Vegas. Even though New Vegas uses the same engine as Fallout 3, to actually create a whole new sandbox game in 18 months is an achievement alone, let alone create one as inspired and packed with top-drawer narratives like Fallout New Vegas is. Obsidian and writer Chris Avellone deserve huge respect to be put on their names for what they've achieved here back in 2010. I think if you've played any of the major Fallout games for more than a few hours, it's hard to ignore the narrative magic that happens within these games, in particular New Vegas, and I think that's why so many who played New Vegas back in 2010, myself included, can look past the train wreck of glitches, bugs and performance problems that plagued the game and endure the issues, because underneath it's still absolutely worth it.
This is fine.
If you've never actually played Fallout New Vegas before, I highly recommend you check out some tutorials on how to get it running up to today's standards though, because as you can see it's running perfectly for me. I'll leave a link to a good tutorial in the description below for those interested, so let's talk about the game itself though. Immediately we're introduced to probably the greatest aspect of Fallout New Vegas and its design: choice. Ignoring one of the ugliest character face creators known to man, we're immediately shown the sheer amount of choice we're about to experience when playing New Vegas. We meet Doc Mitchell, the man who's brought us back from the brink of death after being shot in the face by the crude yet suave character known as Benny and left for dead in an unmarked grave. Doc Mitchell is the first of hundreds of characters we'll meet that are offering us a choice, and the first decision we must make is what kind of human monstrosity will we make, and what shall we call them?
I can't say it's what I'd have picked for you, but if that's your name, that's your name.
Then we're introduced to the infamous special system we've seen throughout the Fallout games, where we can invest into our strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility and luck. After this we sit down with the Doc again and he throws some quick fire questions at us, asking us to answer the first thing that pops into our mind, as well as describing the abstract images that he shows us, with our answers eventually shaping the traits and abilities our character will have. We can amend all of the perks and abilities after answering the Doc's questions if we're not happy with the outcome, but this is the first example of the freedom we're given, and we've only just met our first character in the game. Later into our adventure we'll meet some of the most extravagant and eccentric characters ever written into a game, with so many offering different choices that even they don't know the possible outcomes, and some even end up with split personality disorders.
What the fuck are you looking at?
What did you say?
I'm glad to see you.
When we finally leave the Doc's house and walk out into Good Springs, we take in the sights before stumbling across another example of what New Vegas has in store for us. Our first main quest forces the player to choose between the townsfolk of Good Springs or the incoming threat of the powder gangers, who unfortunately aren't the mental coke addicts I was hoping they'd be. Instead, the powder gangers are named after the association they have with dynamite. Choosing to side with the Goodspring townsfolk showcases your character's perks and abilities right from the get-go, because we're tasked with rallying some of the key citizens in Goodsprings to fight against the powder gangers, but each person we speak to requires some form of skill check to convince them to join the cause, and you're almost guaranteed to miss out on somebody's help because that early in the game you won't have enough skill points in all the necessary categories to convince everybody to join in the fight. Alternatively, you can just team up with the powder gangers and slaughter the whole town instead if that's your thing. Again, this is so early on and it's just a little taster of the choices that the player will be forced to make. The freedom the player is given is pretty unbelievable, with the bright lights of the Lucky 38 Tower constantly shimmering in the distance as a constant reminder of your goal, but there's zero pressure to head over there immediately. Zelda Breath of the Wild was so strongly praised for this, as if it was the first game ever to allow you to head straight to the main objective from the very beginning, when in fact it's actually damn near impossible to do it successfully due to the enemy leveling. Whereas in New Vegas, a game released in 2010, need I remind you, you genuinely can head straight over to the strip and explore so much of the endgame content within the first few hours of playing the game. If gambling isn't on the agenda though, and being a psychotic murderer is more of your scene, then killing a character at any point is a viable option, and it doesn't break the game either. You'll meet major characters later into the game who'll reference your actions and comment on any major characters that you've killed on your journey. You can kill almost anyone and everyone except the essential characters like potential companions, and probably the biggest criticism I have of the game, which even now that I'm a parent I'm still outraged at the lack of freedom to deal with the little snot gobbling children how most people would like to.
Hey you!
Chris Avallone and the team of writers behind him have produced some genius work in creating such impressive backstories to every character, with completely optional quests that are so engaging they could be proposed to publishers as full-length stories and have entire games based around them, in my opinion. The vast array of character personalities is astounding, and even the obvious lack of voice actors to voice them does very little damage to the believability of these personalities. Characters such as an eccentric, uneducated wannabe scientist who calls himself Fantastic, and when asked how he got the job at the Helios 1 facility, he'll come out with a corking line like,
They asked me how well I understood theoretical physics. I said I had a theoretical degree in physics. They said, welcome aboard.
Or meeting Quartermaster Hayes, who is one of the most understanding and polite individuals I've ever had the honour of meeting in a game, considering I needed to buy something off him in the middle of the night and decided to shamelessly poke him awake while he was peacefully sleeping after a hard day's work in the NCR camp.
Hello. Nice to see a friendly face around here.
I've always loved the sheer obnoxiousness of the Pip-Boy's design, but it always baffled me with its built-in radio playing the local stations out of its speaker, so while I'm loudly clattering around searching every single metal container in somebody else's home, stealing their belongings during the middle of the night while they're trying to get some sleep, I was always surprised that more characters didn't have a little hostility towards me due to my decision to blast the Lazy Day Blues out of a massive speaker that's strapped to my arm.
Shut up! Fuck! Shut the fuck up! Shut the fuck up! Jesus Christ!
The diverse characters we meet aren't simply just interesting characters, but it's their stories, their beliefs, and the quests surrounding them, all integrated perfectly into a way that not only engages the player from a narrative point of view, but also from a gameplay standpoint too. As an example, the quest Come Fly With Me highlights so many aspects and mechanics to the game, from in-depth character design showcasing severe mental illnesses, the choices we make and the strings that we can pull to make the narrative dance to the player's tune, as well as the physical use of the game's combat mechanics, fighting your way through groups of enemies, avoiding traps or using stealth boys to make yourself invisible. The quest Come Fly With Me is staged in the Repcon test site facility and is now home to some friendly cultist ghouls who are seeking the great journey beyond. This so-called journey beyond is a blend of religious and scientific beliefs where the cult requires the technology to reach the far beyond, which has only been seen through the visions of the cult leader, Jason Bright. What they're really attempting to do is launch themselves into space using the old world rockets that were used at the testing site. In the facility, a human called Chris, whose expert knowledge on rockets has helped the cult get them so close to their goal, but this Chris dude has entered a severe state of body dysmorphia where he genuinely believes he's a ghoul himself, simply because he was once excluded and ridiculed for being a bald man and has convinced himself he's not welcome amongst humans, or as the ghouls say, smooth skins. The cult has used Chris's mental health issues to their advantage, utilising his belief that he was one of them and his knowledge of rocket science. The choice comes in the final stages of the quest. Using these rockets creates a deadly amount of radiation poisoning and would kill Chris the human in seconds, but do no harm to the cultist ghouls. So, do you tell Chris he's human through the necessary speech skill check, and if you do you allow him to enact his revenge on the ghouls by tampering with the rockets before they launch, sending them spiralling toward their explosive deaths? Or do you convince Chris that the ghouls still think highly of him, and by not allowing him on the rockets, they're simply saving him from killing himself in the radiation? If you can convince him, you have the option to send Chris to a nearby town where he could learn to reintegrate himself with the humans again. Including the DLC, this is just one of the hundreds of quests available, and during the middle of this same quest, there's a whole other section with its own mini plotline taking place. We're sent down into the basement tunnels of the Repcon testing site to find one of the rocket parts, but this basement contains a whole new dilemma the player's forced to decide the outcome of. A team of Nightkins, these blue super mutants that use stealth boys to camouflage themselves, have found their way into the tunnels in search of a huge shipment of stealth boys. The Nightkins have cornered a trigger-happy ghoul called Harland in a room that Harland himself has booby-trapped, and this is the room that contains the stealth boys that the Nightkins are after. You'll be tasked with speaking with both Harland and another mentally ill character, the leader of the Nightkins, Davison, who's developed a dissociative identity disorder and insists he's receiving his instructions from a Brahmin's skull that he's named Antler.
What's that, Antler? We have a visitor.
It's up to you to decide the outcome of this standoff between the Nightkins and Harland. Will you help Harland find his imprisoned friend further into the basement, or will you turn the shipment of stealth boys over to the Nightkins, or will you try the peaceful approach? This all has very little to do with the quest Come Fly With Me, other than the fact that the Nightkins are simply in the way of the tunnels that lead to the rockets that the cult upstairs are so desperate to reach. This is a quest with so many optional tasks within the quest that these tasks are worthy of being their own quest. It's insane, and this was just one example of so many similar quests that all have so many optional interconnecting paths and outcomes that can take hours to complete and have absolutely nothing to do with the overarching plotline and are simply there as an incredible amount of behind the scenes side content. Fallout New Vegas is packed with factions that all dress up in funny little costumes and each having their own beliefs and agendas, so you'll be right at home if you're a fan of technology worshipping badasses in huge robotic suits of armour, or maybe remnants of the old world's democracy who outfit themselves as familiar soldiers is more your cup of tea, or maybe you feel this new world needs a no-nonsense dictatorship and you'll befriend Caesar's legion instead with their spectacularly dazzling ancient Roman attire. Either way, one thing's for sure, there's no shortage of
Politics, 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 politics. Yes.
I think for a lot of gamers there's no room for politics in games, but there's no real world agenda being pushed here. It's more a fascinating alternative that goes deeper beyond what I would have thought 18 months of writing would have allowed. The level of intricacy and genuine raw to the bone moral dilemmas on display and the ramifications of every single choice you make not only makes for one of the most unique shape your own adventure games that I've ever played, but one that can change so dramatically if I make even just a few different choices the next time I play. We're given so much power to be the all-important final vote of which faction in New Vegas will reign supreme. There are two major factions, the NCR and Caesar's Legion, who are fighting it out over the strategical position and resource offerings of the Hoover Dam. The NCR and their emphasis on old world values such as democracy, personal liberty and the rule of law, but seemingly unable to organise themselves well enough to earn the respect respect of everyone in the Mojave Wasteland. Caesar's legion, an imperialistic, reactionary and totalitarian dictatorship based on large-scale slavery and tribal dominance. But then there are other factions less involved in the fight for Hoover Dam, like the House, or rather Mr. Robert House, the CEO of Robco Industries and the owner of the New Vegas Strip, whose main goal is to see his strip strive in the new world with a plan that is dependent on a key item, the Platinum Chip. The item you, a courier of the Mojave Express, were tasked with delivering at the very beginning of the game before Benny very kindly put a bullet in you and stole the chip for himself. You could even choose to ignore all of these ideologies, and with the help of the smiling AI robot known as Yes Man, you could opt for an entirely independent New Vegas. These factions are all essential to the main plotline, but factions that hold lesser importance to the main plotline, of which there are 34 by the way, arguably intrigue me even more, simply because of the quests and all the intertwining relationships surrounding them. Like I said, you could head straight for the New Vegas Strip right from the start, but one way or another you'll find yourself walking beneath the enticing sparkle of the New Vegas lights. The Strip almost feels like an escape, with so much to see and do, so many quest givers to talk to, so many secretively non-violent mysteries to discover, and so much booze to guzzle and gambling games to throw your hard-earned caps at. It made me wonder on this playthrough why I didn't just head straight for the Strip right from the start. Now, from a gameplay standpoint, there's little to no difference compared to Fallout 3, and it's noticeably worse off than Fallout 4 when it comes to combat. I've always enjoyed using the VATS mechanic, which would almost turn the heat of a gunfight into a turn-based RPG, but even though the basics of running and gunning are pretty rudimentary for today's standards, there's still a constant feeling of progression simply because of the sheer number of weapons at the player's disposal, and they all offer their own unique feel to pulling the trigger, and many can only be found in one particular location. Through some impressive environmental storytelling, I always felt incentivized to explore every section of the map, because there's a good chance that something rare and valuable could be hidden within a vault or a secret cave or in the basement of some massive factory. Exploring the wasteland feels so rewarding and almost peaceful at times, until it's not, and could rapidly become intense. As I approached a new area that I was far from welcoming, I soon realised that not only does the vast amount of weapons that I can find and use expand on the game's sense of progression, but the enemy variety, their deliberate location placements, and all the bombastic weaponry and evilness they can throw back at me adds even more of a sense of progressive wonder and what could be waiting around the next corner. Even the RPG mechanics offer the same feeling of evolution within each playthrough. There's an incredible amount of perks to choose from, and these aren't just your simple number boosters like a lot of RPGs clutter into their games, like adding an almost pointless boost to things like a 2% discount at all vendors and crap like that. These perks and traits in Fallout New Vegas can change the game and the way you play it, like gaining night vision, the Mr. Sandman perk allowing you to kill people in their sleep, or you could become a cannibal and feast on the fallen enemies, or the mysterious stranger perk where some bloke in a trench coat could randomly spawn and finish off your enemies to lend a helping hand. Even within your abilities, there's a realistic approach. For example, you do have a general speech stat which works as a standalone skill a lot of the time, but often you'll need specific knowledge on certain subjects to pass certain speech checks, like persuading a character to let you borrow some dynamite would require explosive knowledge, or convincing a doctor you know what the hell you're talking about requires medical knowledge. There was one big area of the gameplay that I would have loved to have seen a little more emphasis on, and that was the survival and crafting mechanics, and these felt more of an afterthought during the 18-month development cycle. You can head to a campfire to craft a variety of medicines and tonics to give you a boost, and you can head to a crafting and reloading bench to break down and craft some gear and different ammo types, but I never felt there was a need to do any of this. There was so much of what could be crafted readily available to find out in the wasteland. There's the odd craftable item that's easier to craft than it is to find, and there's also a hardcore survival mode which removes certain saving options and how easy it is to find these items, but in my opinion I felt this mode simply made the combat harder rather than your day-to-day survival needs. But when it comes to the visuals, the game was released in 2010, but even for 2010 it's still a little rough around the edges, and Obsidian and Bethesda's decision to stick to the desert surrounding Vegas kind of boxed them into a pretty bleak colour palette. Apologies to those on console wondering if this is worth revisiting, and my answer to that would still be absolutely yes. This is totally worth the experience, even at 30 FPS and with the dog's breakfast visuals, but those on PC, you'll see a nice benefit of slapping a few texture mods over the top. Really though, you shouldn't be playing any Fallout game for the graphical spectacle. The unbelievable level of immersion is created and still maintained even now since it released in 2010. This just shows you really don't need cutting edge graphics with blindingly ray traced eyeballs or an open world map that has thousands of quests in terms of numbers, when in reality the differences between the quests available are nothing more than your basic fetch quests or kill this group of enemies quests. New Vegas has so much variety within the quests and expert storytelling that there's very few games out there that can create so much intrigue that once you start discovering your 4th, 5th or even 50th quest giver, you simply can't ignore what it is they have to say, because something very different is going to happen to the last quest you experienced. Fallout New Vegas is top of most players' lists when it comes to the best Fallout game ever, and this was supposed to be a simple spin-off. For me, I still prefer Fallout 4, but that's mainly because I'm a huge base building nut. But when it comes to the engaging narrative and the insane amount of impactful choice we have available to us, I can't think of many better games to play when it comes down to those two aspects of compelling storytelling and the variation of choices. I still feel like I have to emphasise that this game was developed in 18 months, and that alone is a truly remarkable achievement. But put that aside, Fallout New Vegas is a timeless classic, a phenomenal RPG, and a game that set the benchmark for what it truly means to shape your own adventure. I'd love to know what you guys think of Fallout New Vegas. Where would you rank New Vegas as the best Fallout game? Where would you rank New Vegas as the best game ever? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.